The moderator for our next session is Amanda Elder, an advisory board member. So may I please invite Amanda?
And we need 2 chairs, gentlemen, please.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you can hear me. How fabulous. Absolutely wonderful to join you today. And it is a topic that is extremely close to my heart. If I said to you, a database of 24 million people, 6 million room nights, 40 plus brands, and well over 1,000 hotels. Would you say, what's Amanda talking about? Is this one of the big boys, or is this something else? And I'll leave you with one more stat. $2 billion in revenue. We have the most remarkable independent brands and individual hotels that make up the Global Hotel Alliance. And from 2004, this company has grown to achieve those impressive numbers that I've just shared with you. The gentleman that I'm about to introduce started this company back from the very beginning. He is humble, he is the most wonderful host, and a good friend of mine. Please welcome Chris Hartley. So Chris, did I explain a little bit about the Global Hotel Alliance and the wonderful brands we have to give the audience, just to whet their appetite before we talk very generally about loyalty?
It was a very kind introduction, and actually makes me feel pretty old because you said 20 years, and we certainly have achieved a lot in 20 years, and I've been with the company since the beginning, so it makes me realize the passage of time. But yes, great to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I think we've seen a common thread through many of the speeches and the presentations that we've enjoyed the last day and a half. And it's very much about what changed in the certain segments of our business, and loyalty is no different. So in terms of since COVID, after the pandemic, what are the key changes that you've seen?
Well, I think a lot has changed, and a lot of the changes that have happened are not necessarily articulated by the industry because they don't necessarily all reflect what we'd like to hear. And I often find, speaking on the behalf of a private company and smaller brands, perhaps we get to speak more openly and transparently about what we actually think is happening. I think that the big changes that have happened are the way people travel and the reason they travel. And I think it's changed forever, and I think people who haven't recognized yet are a little bit still in denial. But if you start with the biggest segment that many of us grew up with as being our most lucrative segment, and that's business travel. In fact, many of you here today are here as part of a business trip. I think COVID has changed business travel forever. I don't think we realized it was changing prior to that pandemic. It slowly was. I don't think some of us even realized, certainly I didn't, that you could do a video call prior to the pandemic, but I learned that pretty quickly. And I think a number of factors, and we're going to talk about some of them later, I know, and you had a panel on sustainability yesterday, but a number of factors all came together at the same time that I think mean that business travel will never quite be the same again. And I think if you touch on some of those things, the first is technology, the ability, unfortunately, through great technology, to communicate with people around the world without needing to travel.
Right.
I think companies have also looked at the well-being, the health and safety of their employees. There is a belief that business travel is not all good from an employee point of view, and so companies are looking very carefully at what their employees are doing when they travel, why they're traveling, are they safe, and obviously the pandemic itself was one reason why business travel was curtailed completely during the pandemic. And then you get into what is clearly the topic of the moment. We're sitting here during COP28 that's taking place here in Dubai, and that's sustainability. And unfortunately, the reality is that all of us traveling on business are contributing to all the harm that they're talking about trying to rectify here in Dubai during COP28. And so companies are being sucked into that very quickly and realizing that they can't continue to allow their employees to fly around the world and stay in expensive hotels that are contributing, unfortunately, to all of the sustainability issues that we're facing. And so companies are pulling the reins in on business travel. So that, to me, is the first big change that's happened since the pandemic.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing that with all of my counterparts that I speak with. The RFP season is not what it ever was. The corporate travel now is very commonly, let's say, mixed with leisure travel. It is not distinctly one thing or the other. I think we have benefited in the room in terms of average rates. People are more willing to spend more money on leisure travel. However, when it comes to the loyalty piece, it's less frequency, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you have to look at business travel very differently. It's been commoditized, and there's no other way to describe business travel. Business travel, for those of us that are slightly older and grew up in the 1990s, and business travel was a luxury. It was something that companies were willing to spend a lot of money on. It was for very few people, and it was really something that you went home and talked about with family and friends. You know, I went to Paris, I went to New York. Today, business travel has been squeezed, it's been commoditized by companies. They literally set rate caps in hotels. CEOs are not allowed to go and stay in the Ritzes and the Savoys, etc. They are told you have to stay with the rest of the troops in the 4- or 3-star hotel that is our budget cap. And so you've just seen changes in behavior that mean business travel is then less attractive, because who wants to fly halfway around the world in premium economy and stay in a 20 square meter room from a business travel perspective? So what happens is it's getting squeezed by companies, and then the people that traveled on business are less sort of enthusiastic about it. So these are all happening at the same time, and then you add the sustainability factor. And so what you're seeing in the real numbers, in the real world, is significant declines in demand for business travel. And that means we as an industry have to completely change our focus.
Yes.
And the question is, where are we going to find customers to fill all of these amazing hotels that are being built? And the answer primarily is leisure.
And I think as well, I've watched the other programs, quite apart from ours, where they have moved into the experiential piece. So it was very transactional, if you like. You have enough points, you can book your complimentary room, but there was no experience, and may I throw in now that word, emotion. And I think it was so interesting, day one, speech one, when we heard, are we loyal to a brand or are we loyal to a hotel loyalty program? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's absolutely the question of the moment, really, because if you take that business travel discussion and you take my comment that business travel has been commoditized, people do not have an emotional attachment to a commodity, generally speaking. Gold, maybe. But generally speaking, something that's commoditized has no emotional attraction. You don't stay there because you feel warm and fuzzy about it. And so, whereas previously loyalty programs were built around business travelers, that's how it was the way in which you collected all of this data. Business travel was the dominant segment. And the simple concept of a loyalty program was a business traveler stays week in, week out in your hotels. You try and get market share from your competitor by giving them an incentive, and then they spend it on a leisure trip. But unfortunately, those business travelers are not spending what they used to spend. And therefore, companies are saying, like ours and like Hilton's and Marriott's, are saying, well, we can't reward them in the same way we used to. If they're only spending $100 a night, we're not going to give them the same. We're not going to give them a week in the Maldives for spending $100 a night. And so the economics of loyalty are starting to change, and you will see now that brands are focusing their loyalty efforts, as we are, on what is attractive for the leisure traveler. And so the whole notion of a loyalty program has become more experiential. It's become more about engagement with the customer, about meeting up, about events, about having a relationship with the customer more than a transactional relationship as a business traveler. And so that fundamentally reflects what all of the hospitality sector is realizing, and that is we have to start building relationships directly with leisure travelers, not through third parties, directly with leisure travelers.
Right.
And that changes fundamentally the economics of a loyalty program.
Yes, and I think we've seen even the way the airlines have quite significantly changed their program. It's not just frequency, but very much about how much was your ticket. Obviously, which class of travel you're in, but how much did you spend on that ticket? And we see it, those of us who live in Dubai with Emirates, you can buy one of 3 grades of a ticket, and hence your points, your value to them as a loyal customer is completely different.
I think the big change that we've witnessed over the last 20 years or so is the emergence of a very wealthy middle class who want to travel on leisure. And I always give the example, which I think, talking of the airlines and who's spending money in the airlines, of course, in the old days, everyone got to fly business class. They call it business class because it was for business travelers. But I don't know, a lot of you are lucky enough from time to time to fly Emirates business class in one of their beautiful A380s. It's no longer full of business travelers. It generally tends to be full of leisure travelers and friends and families gathering at the bar, or at least that's the perception I have. And I think that's because business class is no longer for business travelers. It's become a premium class for luxury leisure travelers, and that's because there's such huge demand and growth in that segment. And you've got not only the wealth of the middle classes in Europe, which has traditionally been a source of leisure travelers, but now you've got a huge emergence of wealthy travelers in China, in India, in Southeast Asia. And so you're seeing a complete change in the way leisure travel demand is being generated and where it's coming from. And so airlines and hospitality companies are having to change their products. And you'll see the emergence now. If you see all the big brand announcements, they tend to be acquisitions of leisure brands or resort brands. That's where the premium is at the moment.
Yes. I mean, I have to say, I don't know if you've all noticed this, but as a business traveller, I get onto my flight and I'm amazed at how many couples there are. And, you see, and they're all trying to say, please, hostess, we didn't get seated together. Can someone move? And typically you, as the individual corporate traveller, you've all settled in, and then, you've got to move to be polite and help out a couple who are travelling. And I mean, to me, this was never the way some years back. Okay, let's just shift gears a wee bit here. I think there is a completely different mindset from the younger generation. What is a loyalty program that suits them? What are you seeing from your research and from the behaviour of your members, and what do you see for loyalty in general from this younger generation?
I think it comes back to what I said about the commoditization of business travel versus the aspirational nature of leisure travel, especially for a younger generation and a new middle class. In the same way that business travel itself has been commoditized, so were the big brand experiences. So if you go back a little bit further to perhaps the 1970s and 1980s, when we were just starting our careers, the Marriotts and the Hiltons and the Sheratons represented the sort of perfection of hospitality. That's where you aspired to go and stay when you travel around the world, because they were the big luxury brands and they appeared in all the major cities, and they became the definition of luxury hospitality in a brand sense. But over time, the perceived value and attachment to those brands has been eroded. Loyalty programs kept that going. And we've talked a lot when we talk about what drives loyal customers is, are they attached to Hilton?
Right.
Or are they attached to Hilton Honors?
Yes.
Are they attached to Marriott as a brand, or are they attached to Bonvoy? And I think what you've got today is loyal customers who actually started to become more attracted to the loyalty program itself rather than the brands in that loyalty program. And so as business travel gets squeezed, suddenly you have to rethink your loyalty proposition because your loyalty program now has to be attractive to the leisure customers. And so if you look at the alliance that we have, and I know some of the brands have been rotating behind, we've been very fortunate to bring together such fantastic brands as Kempinski. Here in Dubai, for example, you've got Nikki Beach or Anantara. They're brands that are aspirational for the leisure traveler. And so we've been able to build a loyalty program on that new sort of loyal customer. And that is a very different type of customer. They don't see a Marriott and a Hilton experience as something that they aspire to. They see a Kempinski palatial experience or a Nikki Beach club experience as the sort of thing they want to be doing with their friends and sharing. And so a different type of loyalty and a different type of loyal customer is emerging. And we've been adapting to that, and we have to, because the competition for that customer is intense, and they're going to be the next generation of customers, but they don't accept a commoditized product. They want an experience.
Yes. I really wonder if, we've been talking about the way that we attract these younger generation customers, even to a brand such as mine, and how the loyalty program can assist in that way. This is obviously what we talk about a lot. And I think there are those partnership opportunities that can play a huge role. We've seen a lot of change. I mean, we've seen Hyatt buy small luxury hotels or work with them. We've seen them buy Mr. and Mrs. Smith from the Hyatt perspective. You've partnered with a Small World. What's your perspective on the younger generation may not be so much interested in the loyalty program, but the partnership that you then team up with and they learn about the loyalty program?
It's exactly that. You hear brands today talk about the loyalty ecosystem.
Yes.
So it's no longer this transactional, I spent 30 nights with Marriott, therefore I get this status. It's what is the loyalty program doing for my life day to day?
Right.
And so you're seeing this across all of the major hospitality loyalty programs, is they're creating partnerships. Because the reality is, if you look at our database of 25 million customers, the amount of time customers are spending away from home each year, according to our latest survey, is 27 days. They're on the road, on average.
I wish I was only away 27 days a year, but never mind, go on.
27 days. But they may not be staying in a hotel, they may be staying with friends or family, but they're away from home for 27 days a year. That means they're at home for 338 days a year. Okay. The question is, what relationship do you have with a travel loyalty program when you're sitting at home?
Yes.
And the answer is nothing unless you give me a reason to engage with that program. So the airlines were the first onto this. They've said, well, we'll give you a credit card with our brand on it, and every time you go around and spend money on the credit card, we'll give you more airline points. And then the question is, well, what can I do with those points? So then you create partnerships to enable you to spend those points in different ways. And bit by bit, you get these customers more engaged into your loyalty program. And so the question is, what form do those engagements take? And I think, first of all, it is, as I said, the ways in which you can earn the loyalty currency. So, for example, we've just created a partnership with Regent Seven Seas Cruises. So if you book a cruise, which is not a cheap thing to do, you can earn our currency, which is Discovery dollars, by booking that cruise. But in order to spend those Discovery dollars, you have to go back into our hotels. But if you book a cruise, you're going to end up with a few thousand Discovery dollars. So that's one way of engaging customers in terms of driving repeat behavior. The other way to engage them in your brand, and it comes back to experiential, is community. So we created this partnership with a Small World a couple of years ago, and it's a sort of lifestyle membership, a paid subscription, and it's a sort of Facebook for high net worth travelers. And they like hanging out together. And what we do is arrange events for these people when they are, for example, here at home in Dubai. We've got lots of hotels. We've got 30 hotels across all of our brands in the UAE, for example. And we invite those people into our hotels for an event. Last week we had, as you know, an event at Nikki Beach. And we had probably 50 people from a Small World community who are also part of our GHA Discovery Loyalty Program come and join us for the evening. We can engage with them, and it's a great way to build a relationship with customers beyond this transaction of a loyalty program. Yeah. So in short, loyalty programs are going from a transactional sort of relationship into an emotional and experiential relationship, and that's achieved to a large extent through local communities getting to know people where they live, when they're at home, and it's done through partnerships.
Right. So I don't know if the audience has seen this Netflix show, Black Mirror. Oh yeah, it is so strange. But I tell you, I'm hooked because in my opinion, it's showing us what's coming up in the future. If you've not seen it, just wade through the first couple of episodes just to really get you to think. Chris, here's the golden question. What is coming up in the future for loyalty in your estimation? This is your 24/7. What's next?
It's a really difficult. Whatever I say will be wrong, and if I'm right, it will be luck. But let me throw a few thoughts out there.
Right.
Not necessarily just specifically loyalty, but in terms of the evolution of the way we're building relationships in the hospitality sector in particular. I think you have to look to the big tech companies and ask yourself the question, who's going to be in control of the customer relationship in the future? And that's a big challenge for us, especially at, shall we say, the smaller end of the industry, the independents, the private sector. The one thing that we control, and this gives us a chance for the future in terms of building relationships with customers, is if you're in the private sector of the industry and you own your assets, you ultimately can own the customer relationship. But the cost of owning that customer relationship is extremely high. So unfortunately, the power in customer relationships is owned by a lot of third parties, or in our case, a lot of the competition. But actually, if you look at the hierarchy of competition, that's where you start, in my view, to see how the hospitality space and the loyalty space is going to evolve. So you've got an organization like Global Hotel Alliance. So we have 800 hotels. We have 25 million members. We share a loyalty program. 2/3 of those hotels are actually owned assets. So the owners of those hotels are sharing and collaborating around a loyalty program. So they've got quite a lot of power in terms of the financial might, but they don't have the distribution power of the next level of brand, which is the Marriotts and the Hiltons and the Accors. But what's happening there is they're becoming franchises. And whether they like it or not, or whether they will admit it or not, those organizations in the next 5 years will be complete franchise organizations, or dominated by franchises. And franchises only work if you have a strong loyalty proposition. So they're going to double down on their loyalty programs. The question is, can they do that fast enough? Because their shareholders aren't going to be happy with 5% growth or 7% growth. So there's a high likelihood that some of those big players are going to merge in order to give their shareholders the growth that they want. And you're seeing that at the moment play out with the Choice Wyndham battle. So in the hospitality sector, the battle is going to be around loyalty. And all of the big investments as brands become franchises is going to be around loyalty. But, and the big but here is you've got two giants above there that are going to influence these changes. And the first is obviously third parties like the online travel agents, who themselves are able to spend billions of dollars each year in search. They want to control the customer relationship as well.
Right.
They need to control their customer relationship because they are otherwise commodities. They are just transactional.
Yes.
And they know that they won't win as a purely transactional relationship. So they, like Booking.com, will be building their Genius programs, et cetera. And they have the financial power and marketing muscle to win that battle against everyone else because they're 10 times wealthier in marketing terms. But they too have a challenge, and that is Google and Amazon and all the mega tech giants who themselves are snooping around travel and travel loyalty and looking at whether and when the time is right for them to get into that space. And I think as you look at all of those things, you say one thing's for certain, loyalty is critical.
Yeah.
Can we at the bottom end of the food chain survive? The answer is, if you own your assets, you've got a good chance because you control your inventory, you control the customer relationship, but you don't have the financial muscle. So that's why we collaborate. That's why the alliance is so important. But as you go up the food chain, it's going to get harder and harder. So you're going to see a lot of change, I believe, among the big brands. You're going to see mergers. You're going to see the tech giants, and I included the OTAs with the Googles and the Amazons, et cetera, fighting for their slice of the travel pie. And beyond that, I'm not going to make predictions because I think it will get very interesting. But it's all going to play out, I believe, in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yes, something I think we don't talk about very often. We talk about owning the customer, absolutely, building the database. We talk about consolidation of understanding from a consumer point of view about brands, where the big guys have to explain their brands in one sentence, Bonvoy or All or whatever. We don't often talk about the cost, which is largely borne by the owners. And we've seen court cases, we have a lot of pushback on this, all of us in the room, I'm sure those involved with talking to the owners. I mean, will we ever get to a place in the future where it's just simply not affordable and we will have then zero base again? Could you imagine something like that?
I think cost of acquisition is becoming a critical component in the economic thinking that all of us are going to have to get our heads around. And I think owners are going to get more and more switched on to the real cost of every type of booking and every type of customer. I think the advantage that loyalty programs have is that they can drive down the cost of acquisition. But it's tough because, as I just said, all the tech giants are fighting for that customer and they're fighting to charge a higher cost. That's ultimately their goal, to charge as much as they can get away with. And the more customers they control, the more they can charge. On the other hand, loyalty programs can, through engagement, through relationship, through owning the customer journey, they can reduce the cost of acquisition to a reasonable, let's say, sub 10% cost, which owners can put up with. And that's clearly what the big brands are trying to achieve, what we're trying to achieve with Global Hotel Alliance. But you've still got many independent hotels that have, I talk to hotel owners that say, well, I have 80% OTA business. Well, you know what his cost of acquisition is. It's somewhere between 15 and 20% if that's what the mix is in terms of OTA business. So I think as these battles emerge for the customer, owners are going to become more and more focused on that number, and it's going to become more transparent. So we in the hospitality sector are going to have to learn to really look at everything we do to try and bring customers. We talk about a lot at Global Hotel Alliance board level is what's the real cost of acquisition? Do you include your trip to London, to World Travel Market, to go and sign a deal with a tour operator in a cost of acquisition, which is already very high with that tour operator? Do you include that when you look at your budget at the beginning of the year? And you'll see a lot already this year as more and more leisure travel demand has grown, people starting to switch off high-cost channels because of ownership pressure to drive down that cost of acquisition.
Right.
I'll be an optimist and say I think loyalty programs can contribute to a lower cost of acquisition, because ultimately what loyalty programs are trying to do is drive direct bookings.
Direct, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The last thing we've got a few minutes just to touch on that I find intriguing, and I had a lovely conversation with a lady I met for the first time this morning, and we were joking we should call ourselves George Clooney, Up in the Air, that movie where he knew every single program and his Avis and his American Airlines and everything else, and we were sparring in a fabulous way about it. It's a badge of honour in a very strange way to be a Platinum Emirates, to be a Concierge Key American, and yet we all talk about wanting to stay at home. How on earth do we have this confusion within ourselves, Chris?
I think we come from a generation where recognition was even more important than it is today, because it was so much harder 20, 30 years ago to recognize customers. And loyalty programs were a great way of doing that. And I challenge anyone in this room to say you don't feel good if you check into a hotel or an airline and get recognition. Welcome back. Thank you for your business. Thank you for being a Platinum customer. Going down the first class check-in instead of standing at the back of the economy. I don't believe anyone in this room would say, no, I don't want any of that. I like to be a humble traveler and stand at the back of the queue with everyone else.
Right.
That person doesn't exist, and if they do, they're lying. But my point is that loyalty programs are beyond transactional. They're emotional. And companies will continue to fight for the ability to deliver that unique customer experience in the form of personal recognition. And that goes above everything else. You can give me 1,000 Discovery dollars. That's nice, and I might use them at one stage in the future. But nothing beats that personal recognition. And I think when you talk about the platinum status at Emirates and going to the first class lounge and all of the good things that come with that, we're going to fight to hold on to that.
Yes.
Because it really has a tangible value. And so I think as hospitality professionals, what we've got to focus on is that customer relationship. And franchising kills that, by the way. That's my opinion. I mean, I'm sorry if you're part of a franchise organization. The people that own the assets and own the people and the people that work in those hotels work for the owner. Those are the people that are able to deliver that real personalized service and recognition. And I think that's what we have to focus on, because that never changes. That's human nature.
Human connection,
to be
let's
recognized,
face it.
yeah.
Yes. Well, look, thank you so much. I will leave the audience with the last thought, which is I read the Points Guy religiously. If you don't know the value of the programs you're working towards, you're really, really missing out. Chris, thank you so much for your thoughts, and good to be with you this morning.
Thank you, and
Thank you
for
to the
having me.
audience.